All good? All good. Good evening again. Thank you. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Dr. Ken Maker. I am the president of Medaille College. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you to our first session of the 2018 Buffalo's Future Series. I want to thank our special guests and panelists for taking time to participate. I'll give a little bio in a second, but we have Glen Aichinger, Andy Davis, Kevin Lyons, and Colleen Hiam. So thanks to them. It is noteworthy that we are here at Medaille and talking about this topic. The college is in a very unique position to talk about disaster preparedness. No, the place is not a disaster. That is not the case. But we are the only college in Western New York with a Homeland Security program. And you'll be hearing tonight from our professor at large in that program, Professor Steve MacMartin. We are privileged to have him here, but a little bit more on that later. As we'll hear tonight, being prepared for all types of disasters is essential for business, for individuals and institutions like Medaille. Here at the college, we've gone through the process of building a disaster plan. I was quite proud to show the box of stuff in the conference room to our esteemed guests. And I speak from experience when I say that once you have these plans in place, you actually do sleep a lot better because you're prepared as best as you can. Obviously, when stuff hits the fan, all things change and all bets are off, but it is good to have a plan in place. I'm sure you can point to specific examples in your fields in which a lack of planning has led to or exacerbated a catastrophe. But we'll learn from these examples, and that's what tonight is all about. We're always looking for certainty in an uncertain world, and that's what disaster planning offers. Our goal is to give you a few pointers and to emphasize the importance of having a plan from a variety of perspectives. The future of your businesses and the safety of you and your employees obviously might depend on it. As Chief Cheektowaga Police Chief Dave Zack put it after the active shooter incident at Dollar General in November, it is the responsibility of every business to be prepared. As you'll discover, while that process may seem daunting, it is in fact very manageable. Whether you're a small business or a large corporation, disaster preparedness needs to be on your list for 2018. So, a couple of questions just to make sure we're all sort of on the same page with our distinguished guests from Ecmc, from the Small Business Administration's Disaster Recovery System, National Grid, and from the FBI. So show of hands if this might be the first time you're in a room with somebody who actually could enforce. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. These folks have had at dinner tonight, we heard stories about being at the Twin Towers, being at the site of the Boston Marathon bombing, being involved in active shooters, being on the receiving end of a cyber attack. These folks live this world all the time. And so their expertise will be invaluable to us all. And so again, thank you for all the contributions you will give us tonight. So it is my pleasure to introduce Steve MacMartin, the director of our bachelor's and master's degree of Homeland Security. The master's degree was just recently approved after a 7 or 8 year delay at NICED, but we won't get into that disaster. For 3 decades, Steve was a senior special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and its predecessor agency, the U.S. Customs Service. Now retired, Steve devotes his time to teaching Medaille students how to be prepared for all manner of national and international disasters. Steve frequently shares his insight on local TV and radio. As he puts it, those of us in the teaching profession have a duty to share our knowledge where we can or when it can be of service to our community. We are honored to have Steve as a professor and program director at Medaille College, and I'm excited to welcome him to the stage. Please welcome Professor Steve MacMartin.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank Dr. Maker and John Crawford standing up there for helping put this together. I think this should be a very interesting and informative evening for you. The more stories we hear in the media, the more clear it is that organizations and small businesses need to have a disaster plan in place. Having a plan in place, as Dr. Maker said, helps you rest easier at night, but it keeps your business going and it keeps your employees safe. I'd like to share some of my background tonight, provide some perspective on emergency preparedness, and then moderate our panel discussion. At the conclusion of our panel discussion, we'd like to take some questions from the audience. For that matter, or for that reason, we passed out some index cards and some pens. If you folks, during the course of the moderated discussion, think of a question you'd like to ask, please jot it down, pass it towards the aisle. We'll pick them up at random times during the night, and then in our open session we'll try to answer as many of those as we can. As Dr. Maker said, I've been at Medaille now for 7 years. I retired in 2011 as a Senior Special Agent National Program Manager with the Department of Homeland Security. During my career, I've been deployed to a number of places throughout the United States, northern border, southern border. I've dealt with issues clearly or certainly or obviously involved in Homeland Security, but I have a wide range of experience in narcotics investigations, weapons investigations, human trafficking, child pornography, money laundering, smuggling of all types, and of course I have some experience in terrorist investigations. In 1991, my partner and I arrested 4 terrorists at the Rainbow Bridge. They were members of an organization called Jamaat al-Fuqra. There was a big investigation at the time and spanned the border and went into Canada. Also, for 2 months following 9/11, I was assigned to the World Trade Center. I worked at Ground Zero. And then I went back in February for a month and worked at Fresh Kills, which is the landfill where most of the debris, or much of the debris, was taken from Ground Zero. With all my Homeland experience, I'm not a stranger to emergency and disaster preparedness. I've participated in events where we work to protect both our national security and our small and mid-sized and large-sized businesses. These events have taught me how important it is for every one of us to be prepared both at home and at work. Natural disasters, such as the recent Thomas Fire in California, man-made disasters like the recent train derailments that Amtrak has been experiencing, make us all realize that no matter the source, the threat of disaster is real and can be very dangerous. I want to lay some groundwork and talk about a disaster. Obviously and clearly, a disaster is anything that adversely affects your business, your family, or an institution. Disasters can be natural, like a wildfire, tornado, earthquake, or they could be man-made. If we look at natural disasters, the cost to recovering from them can be staggering. Think of the costs involved in any of our natural disasters that we've had lately. I was going to cite the mudslide problem in California. When I have a discussion like this, especially in class, when we're talking about disasters and saying terrible things can happen, you know, businesses can go out of business, and things, it just can be tragic. People tend to say, well, it can't happen here. Well, I have to tell you, it can and it does happen here. We don't have to think too far or much farther back than last summer when a tornado hit the Erie County Fair 1 week before the fair was scheduled to start. Most of us remember Snowvember, which happened in 2014, involved a number of throughway closings. We were discussing that at dinner tonight. I'm sure everybody remembers the October surprise. If, like me, you were trying to make your way home from a meeting, you remember how terrible that was. I'm sure that many of you remember the Thanksgiving storm we had in 2000. Again, I was making my way home from work downtown Buffalo that night. It took me 4 hours to get out to Lockport, New York. It is one of the reasons we now have the snow evacuation routes that have been set up by the city of Buffalo, and why I think, probably you all know, a number of organizations let out the minute there's a threat of a snowstorm. People are getting out early. Well, there's a reason for that. And of course, if you're a little older, you'll remember the blizzard of '77. Anybody here remember that? Probably not, right? Oh, okay. Not only can these types of disasters cause physical damage, they can adversely affect your business. When you can't open your door to customers, you can't run your business. Now I mean, when you can't open your door. Most of you, I would assume, have been through a storm where the snow is so high, you cannot open the door. But it's a real tragedy if you can't get your customers in, or you can't get your customers or your employees out. It was only, I think, last winter when there was such a huge snowstorm in the south towns, they couldn't get the teachers and the students out of some of the schools down there. You need a plan to address that. Those are natural disasters. And an interesting thing or something to consider about natural disasters is you sometimes have a little window before they occur or while they're occurring. It gives you a little bit of time, as little as it might be, it gives you a little bit of time to think about it. The problem that comes is with man-made disasters. When man-made disasters occur, generally there is no window, there's no time. The 2009 crash of Flight 3407, the sludge releases this summer in the Niagara River, the active shooter that Dr. Maker mentioned in Cheektowaga. All of these are man-made incidents that we have no control over. And probably one of the most crippling types of disaster these days, unfortunately, is cybercrime and cyber terrorism. IBM's chairman, Gina Rometty, said, and I quote, "Cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world." I was a cybercrime investigator with the Department of Homeland Security for 15 years, and I couldn't agree more. It has to be the #1 threat that we're facing today. The average number of cybercrime events rises every year, and there's reason to believe that those events are underreported. Think about it. If you're running a business, do you run to the newspapers and say, "Oh, we were just hacked. We just lost a whole bunch of money. We were held ransom"? It's not something you do. So even the statistics we have may be misleading. Frighteningly enough, studies show that if you lose your information technology for more than 9 days, you're likely to go bankrupt in a year. Another problem, something we need to consider and think about as far as emergency preparedness, is workplace violence. Workplace violence isn't new. We've dealt with internal threats, disgruntled employees, or employees who bring domestic issues to their office places for years, but the incidents seem to be on the rise. The active shooter scenario, along with acts of terrorism, are both very real threats that every workplace everywhere has to consider. The Las Vegas shooting, the Orlando nightclub, Sandy Hook, Aurora, Colorado, you remember back. I've tried to span a large distance. Those events are probably something seared in your memory. How many have occurred in between those? Western New York is not immune. We've had 2 in the last year. All organizations that I know of, certainly large and mid-sized organizations, hold fire drills. They have fire extinguishers placed every few feet, determined by law where they have to be. All organizations practice. The college just went through their 3rd mandated fire drill recently, I think it was last week, of a number that we have to hold every year. But if you think about it, I looked this up on Google, my friend, the threat of risk, the risk of dying in a fire is 0.8%. And yet every business, every college we know has a plan to deal with it. How many have a plan to deal with an active shooter? Think about it. Think about your organization. Does your organization have one? Chances are it doesn't. So I ask you, bear in mind, 70% of active shooter scenarios occur in the business, or, anybody else want to take a shot where else? Education institutions, schools. 70%. Every one of those businesses and schools should have a plan, just like they have a fire drill. All right, so you're asking yourself, can disaster planning pay off? All we have to do is look at an example of Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley was the largest tenant in the World Trade Center in 1993 when it was the parking garage underneath it was bombed by terrorists. It took Morgan Stanley 4 hours to evacuate all its personnel from the 2 towers. And its managers looked back at that in an after-action report and presciently said to themselves, this isn't acceptable. We have to change this. So they set about setting a plan. They wrote the plan, they practiced the plan, they continuously updated the plan. And then, 9/11, the same type of disaster occurred. Interestingly enough, they almost took a direct hit. They were very close to where one of the airplanes hit. Their entire 2 offices evacuated the World Trade Center in 45 minutes. They lost 7 lives, but the loss could have been much, much greater. All due to them getting together and setting up a plan. The key is in making a plan. FEMA tells us that 40% of businesses never reopen after a disaster. That is a telltale sign of the failure to make a plan. If you're asking yourself, where do I begin? Where do I turn for help? Tonight is a great start. We have put together 4 experts who who have dealt with these emergencies, who have plans to deal with them in the future, and are going to try to impart some of their knowledge to you. If I haven't lulled you to sleep by now, you may be thinking about types of disasters that could affect your business. You may be your mind wandering a little bit, thinking, well, what could happen to my tile store? Or what could happen to my corner grocery? Well, if you are, good for you, because at least you're starting to think about it. You're starting to think that something may happen and that there might be a way to prevent it. You have to remember 2 things about every disaster. The first is the disaster itself and how you deal with the immediate threat. But the second thing is mitigation and recovery. And we're going to talk about that tonight. Every plan, every disaster emergency preparedness plan needs to address both. Remember that once the disaster is over, it's much easier to get operational if you have plans that deal with all of the possible scenarios you can think about when times are good, so that you can deal with them when times are bad. You need to think, after a disaster, if my door is closed, how do I open it? And if my door is open, how do I keep it open? 2 final points I want to make tonight. First, make sure your plan not only includes how to address the actual crisis, but deals with communication. And there's 2 types of communication. Communication inside your organization to keep people apprised of what is going on, and communication outside your organization. Because as soon as you have a disaster, the media is going to know about it, and they're going to want a story. I'm sure you realize that any events we've touched on can affect your supply chain, your business continuity, your customers, your employees, and more importantly, it could affect your family. It underscores how important it is to be prudent and do the responsible thing. So please, consider getting a plan in place. We have a challenge for you. September, I know it's not September, but September is National Preparedness Month. Use the impetus of tonight. Use some of the things you'll get from this panel to start to make a plan for your organization, your institution, or even your home. And then by the time September comes, you'll be ready or well on the way to deal with it. I have a wide range of experience in Homeland Security, but I am not a disaster preparedness expert. But these people that we're going to bring up here right now, they are. Please take this advantage to listen to them and learn to them and think about the importance of making a plan. So if I could, I'll ask Dr. Maker to come back up, introduce our 4 esteemed panelists, and then we'll begin our moderated discussion. Thank you all for coming.
So as Steve said, we do have a program in Homeland Security, but we do have a lot of programs at the undergraduate and graduate level. So 2,214 students at the college in undergraduate and post-traditional studies. I encourage you to think about Medaille College as a place to continue and expand on your education. So, let's see here. What do we have? New data regulations. So coming up, one additional item. There we go. I would like to mention before introducing our panelists, for anyone interested in learning more about cybersecurity after tonight, Our friends at Phillips Lytle and partner Ken Manning is here, and I can't see anything with those down. Ken Manning from Phillips Lytle is over there. We'll have a presentation on, 1 week from today, new data regulations, answers to frequently asked questions, 8 a.m. February 15th at the Phillips Lytle office at 1 Canal Side. You can register for that at phillipslytle.com. On to our distinguished panelists. First is Glen Aichinger. Sorry, did I say it right? No, I have one of those. Aichinger, sorry. Glen Aichinger, Director of Electric Emergency Planning for National Grid. Glen is responsible for the preparation, response, and regulatory compliance of National Grid's electric emergency response plans in upstate New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. This includes the interface with regulators, state offices of emergency management, county and municipal emergency services, and providing support for employee awareness training and exercises. Welcome, Glen. Come on up. Andrew Davis is Chief Operating Officer at Ecmc. He has more than 20 years of experience in healthcare administration, financial management, and quality care. He is an accountant, yay, part of the brotherhood. In addition, Andrew has served in a variety of senior management positions in healthcare organizations in Florida, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. Most recently, he serves as interim CEO at United Medical Center in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Andrew. Kevin Lyons. Kevin Lyons is the Deputy Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigative Unit for the FBI in Washington, D.C. And he is also the Acting Special Agent in charge for the FBI here in Buffalo. Welcome, Kevin. Colleen Hiam is the Center Director for the U.S. Small Business Administration Customer Service Center located in Buffalo. The CSC is a state-of-the-art national contact center supporting the needs of SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance by providing a single resource for its internal and external customers. Her past roles during her 2 decades with the SBA include Deputy Center Director for the Customer Service Center, Chief Operating Officer for the Center, Business Development Specialist, and Public Information Officer. Welcome. We look forward to hearing more on your work tonight, and welcome, and thank you again for spending your evening with us. Again, if you have questions, you write them on the cards, and students and staff will collect them on a periodic basis.
I want to say how grateful I am to our 4 panelists. There has to be a century's worth of knowledge sitting at this table, and I am impressed as hell, so I want to thank you folks for coming. Let's jump right into it. Kevin Lyons, if you don't mind, I'll ask you the first question. Would you say that the reality of functioning in a post-9/11 world has caused us to adjust to a new normal when it comes to business operation?
I mean, absolutely. Even for the FBI, I'll never forget, I was in New York City during 9/11, was there when the towers fell. At the time I was working organized crime, which was, as far as in the criminal world, was the priority in the New York office. Front page of the New York papers every day, everything we did. Of course, you know, movies made about it. And then I'll never forget, after witnessing that and being there, that as far as the FBI, that our lives have changed, that the FBI itself as an agency is going to change forever. And what that meant was we've always, at different levels, shared information, but it showed that, you know, as far as when after the towers fell, and how important it was for sharing information all over, not just from different aid one to another, but all over the intelligence community, and how partnerships was important. Again, the bureaus always had partnerships, but we realized that we could not do what we do by ourselves. We needed to partner with everybody, not just law enforcement, but academia, private sector, everything that we do to be successful relied on information sharing partnerships with all those different agencies. And training. We needed to be able to work with our other agencies, law enforcement, private sector, and academia, and provide training on how the Bureau does things and also make them better. One way we do that is through our National Academy program, where officers come down to Quantico, Virginia, a number of times a year to train in investigations, techniques, and how to make them better, so that when we're working there, we're able to do things together.
Thank you. Colleen Hiam, could you address the same thing, the new normal as far as businesses since 9/11?
The new norm is you never know what to expect. The weather has gotten absolutely crazy, and you really need to know when you do a plan, especially for a small business, that you have to look at it, but also test it. Don't forget to test your plans and work them out and see what's working and what's not working. There's challenges, and so many challenges. When we had just recently, we were at 9/11, and it was very difficult because we went in there, we couldn't even find a way to get there because we couldn't get our people there because there were no flights. Thankfully, we were close enough that we just drove down there, but finding our people hotels and everything and getting them secure was very difficult. And each time we go into a disaster and work a different disaster, it's always different. There's something always unique about these particular disaster events that you're working on. A lot of partnership. When we go in, we work with FEMA, and FEMA is our lead agency, and the SBA comes in to help. And a lot of people don't realize what the SBA actually does. In a disaster situation, people think of the SBA as the entrepreneurial program that helps people go into business, expand their business. But we actually have a disaster program that's been around for quite some time, and we are there for your long-term recovery. After those agencies go in and respond, we actually come in and we're your long-term recovery. So if you don't have insurance, what you may do is, if FEMA is involved, if it's a large disaster, you will go to FEMA and talk to them about possibly making you safe, sanitary, and secure, but then you'll come to the SBA, and we put you back to pre-disaster condition. So hopefully you've had a plan and you plan for it. We will help you with your uninsured losses. That's what we're there to help you with. But if you have, say you're in Florida and there's a summer home, we can't help you with something like that. It's only your primary residence. So you want to make sure that you're well prepared, you work your plan, you make sure that you've tested it, so that you don't have to worry about coming to us, because how many people really want to take out a loan? You don't want to have to do that. A lot of people aren't prepared to do that. The thing that SBA does is it's long-term, and we help to fit it into your budget as best possible, so low interest, long-term, but really you don't want to have to come to us. So after 9/11, so many things have happened. It's very hard for us. We have to plan constantly. We face some challenges, so we're always looking at new things and trying to make sure that we're well prepared to help respond to anybody who needs to come to us for help.
Kevin, can you just address some specific threats that the FBI is concerned about, or think small businesses and medium-sized businesses should be concerned about?
Sure. So one, in particular, is the cyber threat that came up in the opening remarks, and it was mentioned that what I need to be concerned about my computer systems. And in the cyber world, we see a number of significant cyber attacks that started what we call hot points, companies that could be a small business where bad guys are using that company because there is no security system to hop in multiple times and then target the company they want to target. So that's why we cyber training, cyber security is very important, because this doesn't just affect the big companies, the big financial companies, big healthcare companies, things that you think would be prone to that, but all over. Also, as far as our, we spent a lot of time after 9/11 working the counterterrorism threat, helping companies build, barriers and fences and ways to protect their companies so they could subject to a counterterrorism attack. After that, we realized, based on how significant technology's got, particularly computer systems, is they could have what's called the insider threat inside a company. It could be from a foreign threat country that's employed in a particular business, and it could be there for a number of years. And just at the flip of a switch, that person on demands from that particular country has shut down whatever they wanted to, the grid system, the banking system, the water system. So we kind of, besides the counterterrorism threat, but also that insider threat on how to protect your companies from things like that.
Here's a question for National Grid, Glen Eichinger. Do you think that natural disasters are still or represent the most serious threat, or do you think that there's also the same sort of threat from man-made disasters?
Well, I think when you look at the threats to the utilities, weather events and natural disasters are always at the forefront of what we expect to come up against when it comes to interruption of service or compromising the infrastructure. But more and more, cyber is something that is entering our world in terms of the threat of another entity taking control of our system, which is something that most people don't think about, but is actually a possibility. So in our company, we do have a cyber defense department that works very closely with all of the agencies and computer technologies and that to defend against that. The thing is, we don't hear too much about it within our company just because it's so important and so confidential. My responsibility is more on the electric infrastructure side, on the outside assets and the infrastructure, but most definitely the threat of cyber and natural disasters are equally certain utilities.
So can you address how National Grid could respond and how they could help small businesses in the event of a natural disaster? Say we're in Western New York, say a snowstorm.
Sure. In fact, that's the beauty of our plan. On my desk, I have sitting off to the side our emergency response plan from 1955. So it's something that our company was Niagara Mohawk.
Is that your most current one?
No. I think it's an example of the fact that when Niagara Mohawk, prior to National Grid, Niagara Mohawk had a plan. But I think the real turning point to the planning was really the sequence of storms that probably started with Irene Lee and then moved into Sandy. And that was the really tipping point, turning point to where the emergency planning preparedness process for the utilities really took off in a different direction, which really applied an enormous amount of more structure, procedure, discipline that involved a lot of the things that you've already heard tonight. So some of the things that our plans do is they're flexible enough to allow for what Colleen mentioned is every storm is different. No two storms are ever alike. There's always a variation that will throw you a curveball. So your planning process has to be one that is flexible enough to be able to adapt to the curve. So our plans are such that they coordinate not only internally with getting resources, equipment, materials, plans to rebuild the system, starting with life safety and protecting the public and our employees to down wires and hazards in the field, to actually getting the service back up as quickly as possible following that path of electricity from the source point of where it's generated to the end user. And typically that process includes getting power restored as quickly as possible and as safely as possible to as many customers as possible. And within that process is a network of communication and coordination protocols that we have built and we practice and exercise and maintain throughout the year through that blue sky environment to make sure we have all that coordinated to help the large critical infrastructure of customers like hospitals, water treatment facilities, critical infrastructure get back on sooner, and then get our customers and businesses back on sooner as a coordinated effort with the County Emergency Services, the Office of Emergency Management of the State of New York, and our first responder.
Thank you. So we've set the foundation. We've talked about a new normal, post 9/11 world. We've talked about man-made versus natural disasters. Andy Davis, I'd like to ask you from Ecmc, how does this environment that we've now set, how does this change the way business does business?
I think the way it changes it is it makes us take a more critical look at our systems, to evaluate them, to say what could happen, and to say what wouldn't happen. At Ecmc, obviously, everybody pretty much knows in April we were hit by cyber. If you haven't heard, that's a joke, everybody. But April 9th, we had a cyber attack. Prior to that, I would have said to you, we were looking at resources and where to invest. We would have probably been talking more about active shooter, more about patients in the ER who were volatile. We have a behavioral health unit that certainly high profile, but trying to make sure that the patients and families are safe there. Luckily, though, we did begin a process to start talking about cyber, and thankfully we did took a number of steps prior to April 9th to be prepared. But it changes the conversation of anything can happen in your facility, from active shooter to cyber to disgruntled employee to disgruntled patient to disgruntled family member, and you have to look at it from all sections of your business.
And how do you do that? How do you plan for so many different eventualities?
Well, I think you have to assess risk. One of the things that we try to do, and we continue to do certainly on many different fronts, is assess the risk of things happening, of bad things happening in our facility. What could go wrong, go through scenarios, and we, during our disaster preparedness, think about what type of disaster would happen, and sometimes we tabletop, so what would happen if a plane crashes here? What happens if an active shooter comes here? And I think going through a lot of different scenarios and assessing where you are, and taking a critical look at your business. And our business is a little different than customers, because our business, I would say, is really families. So when our systems go down, it's really about patients and the impact that happens to the families across the spectrum.
And I just want to follow up. Clearly active shooters is something that I have on my mind that I think is a great threat to businesses. If you don't mind, please tell me. But if you don't mind, do you have an active shooter plan in place at the hospital?
We do. We have an active shooter plan in place. Unfortunately, a number of years ago, there was an active shooter at the hospital. So we have a plan, a process. One of the things that was interesting in terms of cyber, but also other places where I've been, we've been able to streamline a lot of our disaster preparedness for a lot of the same mechanisms happen. We set up our command center, we began a communications plan, we began all those different steps. And interestingly enough, no matter what disaster, there is a cadence and a similarity to the if you plan ahead. And Kevin Lyons from the FBI, you've got a wide range of experience in your career. What would you say about law enforcement's cooperation with small businesses, or with, I keep saying small business, with business in general?
So it's been a major factor, like I mentioned, particularly after 9/11, our partnership with private sector. Basically, what does the FBI do every day? Just so that they, a lot of people don't know. So we have different training, such as Citizen Academy. We bring every field office has FBI Citizen Academies, where we bring people from all walks of life in the community, particularly the private sector, and show them what the FBI is, what we're all about. We open the curtain. So it's not you know, what was mentioned before. I have to, you know, tell you, shoot you if I tell you anything. It's not what we're about. So that's kind of getting it out there. This is what the FBI is, and we're your next door neighbor, and how we do things, why we do things, and lay that out in the open. So that's been very very important. And also we've had, in our field offices, we have what we call outreach coordinators, where they go to the private sector companies and talk to them about the threats and how the FBI can help them, or how to protect themselves. Other things such as InfraGuard programs. So we have a number of private partnership programs where we teach you how to protect yourselves, but also what the FBI can do for you.
For each of you, I want to ask, and the others can start thinking about it as I pick on Colleen, ladies first, from the Small Business Administration. What could you share with us is one or two of your top lessons that you've learned in your experience in dealing with disasters?
A couple of things, especially most recently with the disaster in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. I'm going to use your phone. These right now are lifelines. Think about it. When everything happened, people now don't have landlines anymore. How did they get power? How do they call out? What do they do after a disaster? Do you have enough money at home so that you can go out and purchase whatever you need? Because if you don't have gas in your car, how are you going to go and get over to get anything? So make sure that you have, how do you get power if there is no power? What if National Grid can't get to you for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks? How are you going to handle it? We need power a lot of times to survive, to run our heat, to be able to cook, to be able to communicate, to be able to get money in order to purchase things. And we're running into that down in Puerto Rico right now. So think about some of the things. We were there on the phones when so many people called us after Katrina, after Puerto Rico. Our agents, our poor agents, had such a hard time because they were dealing with people who had such large losses and would sit there and say, oh my God, I've just lost everything. What do I do? They hadn't even taken a shower for a week because they didn't have water. So these are some of the things, even if you're a family. When we're working at the SBA, a lot of people don't realize 80% of what we do are with homeowners and renters. Those are the people we help the most. We help communities come back so they can be economically viable. Small businesses is only 20% of the amount of people that we actually help. So, and with small businesses, let me just give you a couple of other statistics that Steve didn't have with him. $3,000, if you're a small business owner, $3,000 is the median cost of downtime for small businesses impacted by extreme weather events. 4 out of 5 businesses, as I said, fail, but they also fail with the loss of a key executive. And remember, if you ever go through a disaster in your small business, what happens if your home and your family have also gone through it at the same time? What are you going to deal with? How are you going to deal with both rebuilding your business and working on helping your home and your family come back? Another one was this, 90% of small businesses have the majority of their customers within 2 miles of their only location. That makes them even more vulnerable. So if you're a small business, you have to look at where your customers are and how vulnerable am I to a disaster and how do I plan for this as well. In New York City, a couple of years, a crane fell down, and it was weeks before these small businesses on that avenue could open again. Many of them had to come to us for additional money in order to operate because they lost probably 3 to 5 weeks of income because of a crane dropping right on the street. So just some thoughts to think about. What I do want to say is there's 3 areas if you're a small business or if you're a family and want some help. There are 3 things that I want to bring up. One is disaster preparedness. FEMA has a site, and it's called Are You Ready? And you can look that up, and they have information for both families and citizens as well as for businesses. And they talk about the various disasters that can happen and how to help you plan for them. Another one is the American Red Cross. They have a Ready rating program. So you can go on that, and it helps guides organizations, schools, and businesses, and it has some measurable things that you can look at. There's also the IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. And they have some fabulous information on there with checklists and booklets. That's one of the better sites I've ever seen. And anytime I deal with both a family or a business, I tell them about that site to go out and pull that information. It's ivhs.org. And I'll leave that information here with Steve, so if anybody wants it or wants to know how to get to that information will be available.
Thank you. Andy, the same question. What's one or two top lessons you could take away from your experience?
I wouldn't necessarily rank them, but I think some of the experiences I would say was, one, make sure that you definitely insure. When we went through cyber, another place I've been to, particularly cyber, we had increased our insurance limits for a cyber attack, and we had increased it from 2 million to 10 million because of the threat. So on April 9th, when cyber attack hit, there was a comfort knowing that we had that part in place. For, I think, large entities and even small entities, I think making sure that you have sufficient access to capital or opportunity to work with a bank for in terms of cash, because if you have any type of disaster, there's going to be a time period where you're going to have to think about cash. Cash is king. That's probably accounting to me. Because the first question your employees are going to ask you is, am I still going to get paid? And if you cannot answer that question, then it's called anarchy. And we had, I always say to the site, the first thing out of our mouth was, everybody's going to get paid. And it took down the stress level almost 5 or 6 decibels, that we're going to make it and everybody's going to be okay. But having access to cash, and I would say for a small entity is vital. I would say those are top 2, and if you have employees, one of the things that we learned as a lesson learned was feed your employees and take care of them. The best thing we did was feeding them and just communicating with them and taking care of them.
That's excellent. Thank you. Boots on the ground advice. I like that. Glenn, same question. Top 1 or 2 lessons from your experience in disaster and emergency?
Sure. And I think Andrew said something very important a few minutes ago. It talked about a certain cadence or frequency that goes through an event. And when you have an emergency plan and you have established structure, organization, process, discipline within your emergency response plan, then you can adjust and manage just about anything. Because there's always variables that are going to change, whether it's you can get resources or not, whether you have an issue with access to a certain area, or whether there's a certain scenario within the event that causes you problems. But one of the most important things that we found, and these are the takeaways that we found over the years, is that the actual restoration of service follows the same path. And we test that, and we're prepared for that, and it's pretty much been the same for years. What gets better is technology, materials, equipment, so it makes that process work more efficient. But two of the most important things that we found over the years, since those big turning points of storms Irene, Lee, Sandy, and the ones that we've had since then, is number 1, setting expectations within the community, and then the proper communication and coordination with external parties, and keeping your employees informed. So what I mean by that external coordination, we have a network of people that we test and drill with and communicate with year-round that encompasses the emergency services group within the counties, fire coordinators, the sheriffs, New York State Office of Emergency Management, and New York State Police, including critical infrastructure customers, special needs customers, life support equipment customers. Those are, and our regular, just normal, probably everybody in this room, a regular customer is starving for information. We have to set the right expectation. If we tell you power is going to be out for a week, then that's what you need to know. The worst thing we can do is say, we're pretty sure it's going to be on in 2 days, and then you're out for 10. That's the worst thing that could possibly happen. And through all of the years of working with the OEM and county emergency services, it's really just, we need to know what's going to happen so we can go to contingency plan 1, 2, 3, or 4 and work the plan, because that's what the plans are there for. So our big points that when we do our training every year, we have priority 1 and priority 1A. Priority 1 is life safety, protecting our customers, our employees from hazards in the field. As you may imagine, a down wire can be extremely dangerous. And that's the first priority, is to keep our customers safe. And right there next to it as 1A is setting expectations, communication, and coordination.
So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Colleen, who should be in the room when the process of planning for disaster starts?
You should be in the room. I was doing this here at the Small Business Administration in my office. I have my managers and my top management there, but I also have employees there as well. And we help test that. Because the biggest thing is, as long as you have your plan, and you are responsible to your employees, to your customers, it will help you be responsible to your community and help you to rebuild it faster and quicker. So you want to make sure you have your top people with you, because I have certain divisions, and those divisions all have a voice, each one of them, and they're all important, no matter how small, as well as the employee. So I have the employees there. Do I have to run it up the chain? Yes, we have to run it up the chain. I have to test it. I also have a building that I have to worry about, so that building and the security in the building is involved. We are in the federal building in downtown Buffalo. We are a big target, so we often do a lot of planning with our own security committee in the building. But for my own plan, it's within our facility, so it would be with our employees, our management, and then also making sure that our upper management is well aware of everything. And that's how we would handle it.
And Andy, how about for specifically a business organization? Who should be in the room?
We start with our CEO, and we have our executive leadership team, which is comprised of myself as the CEO, our CNO, government relations and marketing, communications people, and then we'll bring in our managers, especially those at critical areas such as ER, OR, and ancillary services. And we will add to that group as we see fit for those people that we work with.
Kevin, can you tell us if there's a role for law enforcement in helping businesses prepare for emergencies and disasters?
Absolutely. I mean, every day that we rely on private companies to tell us what the issues are, what the threats are on a daily basis, and one of the particular things is preparedness. And I mentioned all the different private entities that we work with on a regular basis, teach them how the FBI does it. I mean, I think that we've always been an agency that prepares, just like all the other law enforcement agencies, but probably after 9/11, we over-prepare. And even the past couple of days that I've been here, a SWAT team went out to do a number of arrests, and I was with the two ASACs during that time during the briefs, and we went through every single scenario that could happen. So that's what we teach companies. We prepare for every scenario that could happen. If there's a major disaster, how to you have a place to go. Your employees have a place to go. You have a way to communicate. You have a phone tree. You have a backpack full of necessities that you would need in case there's no water, no food, things like that. So at the FBI, I think we've done internally a lot of training like that, and we teach our partners and private sector community the same thing.
Excellent points. Thank you. Glenn, what would you suggest every business include as components of an emergency and disaster preparedness plan?
I think starting with fundamentals. A lot of it has been mentioned tonight is that number one, you have to have an organization that's structured around process and something that's disciplined that you can just fall back on at like second nature. So when you're looking at an emergency plan, a lot of it is relative to resources, organization, safety. You know, the way we look at it at National Grid, we start with our restoration priorities, so to speak. We start with safety, and then we start working, back into restoring power to the largest customers, the biggest outages. So that usually starts with the transmission system, and to substations, distribution, and right down to the So when you look at the most important things in your plan, it's really covering the fundamentals, the basics, really the needs that you have in terms of sustaining life safety, and then moving into the mitigation and recovery of whatever your business might be, and moving from there. So if you are in the food business and you rely on refrigeration, well, your part of your plan should be there to have backup power for your refrigeration, because if the power goes out, you could lose your product, and you need to make sure that that's recoverable, and you don't lose the power for that. So, I work for National Grid. I have a natural gas-fired automatic generator sitting in my backyard, ready to go, because when the power goes out, I'm not home to take care of things. I'm at work. So you really need to think about every aspect of what you need to protect, and then build in contingency plans, and not just one. On your sump pump, you have your main pump, backup, and then you have that water pump as your third contingency. And that's really what you have to think about is everything that could affect the needs, and then build plans in protect those.
I think
from Buffalo, and you remember Blizzard 77, make sure you have 6 back in your refrigerator. Okay? Yeah.
And now I've lost my place. Andy, what I was going to ask is, now from your experience, I mean, the cyber attack was kind of the most visible thing that's happened in Western New York along those lines. Now that you've had a chance to look at it, is there something that you could suggest to other businesses that they should do that maybe you didn't do?
I think what I would suggest, I think we hit on the head was we had a couple of backup systems that we went to. Unfortunately, we actually rebuilt our system from a backup to backup to backup, and we learned that we probably should have 4 of them, and which was interesting. I think we also learned, and I think this really hit home the first couple of days, was as much as you can do to remain calm and work with law enforcement. I know the FBI, when they came and sat with us on Tuesday afternoon and really walked us through that this disaster, and we can call it a disaster, for us as cyber was really a criminal invasion. And that was important for our psyche because we could then say, look, this was an attack of us. And they educated us on, particularly one of these we learned that was small governmental municipalities were getting the most for cybersecurity because they didn't have backups. So obviously we had several backups and we're still here. But understanding that we didn't cause the disaster, but now we had to deal with it, I think was one of the things that helped galvanize our facilities to understand that we were under attack. And now we've got to respond as an organization together to do that. And I think that was one of the things that we learned, that you've got to stay together and be methodical and go back to discipline. We have been in downtown procedures and practiced downtown procedures prior to cyber attack. And practicing going to paper almost 6 weeks prior to that benefited us greatly during that attack.
Great, thanks. Colleen, can you specifically detail the sort of resources that are available to businesses in the event of an attack
In the event of an attack
or a disaster?
As I mentioned, those sites have some very good information for anybody who is out there. With regard to small businesses, the SBA has resource partners around the area. The resource partners are the small business development centers that are located at some of the various colleges around the area. One is just down the street at Buffalo State College. They offer counseling free of charge. There's also the Service Corps of Retired Executives. They work out of our building in downtown Buffalo from the SBA's entrepreneurial office. They also do counseling and provide advice that again is free of charge. And then the other thing is I would go online again to FEMA. They have an extensive library of information, American Red Cross, and of course that Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They all have very good information, a lot of tools, a lot of information and resources available.
Thank you. Kevin, what can businesses do to help you help them in the event of a disaster?
So one thing in particular, if the FBI shows up, if you have any type of criminal activity, cyber intrusion, an insider threat issue, is when we're there to get information from you to help you, help put those people in jail and get to the bottom of what that problem is. So the main thing is that we need cooperation from our partners out of the business world to tell us, give us access, and let us know what happened and talk to us.
Glenn, what can we do as individuals or families immediately tonight when we go home to help plan for something like this?
I think a lot of things that help to plan is, number one, look at your situation in your home in terms of just taking stock in how your household runs. Think about your sump pump. Does it run all the time? Well, if it runs all the time, one of the things you might think about is a backup for your sump pump, or how that's going to work if you lose power. Think about food storage, and you have an extra freezer. That goes, if you lose power, and think about a worst case, it could be a 3, 4, or 5 day storm. You want to be able to understand how you're going to mitigate the loss of what you have on your property. If you are dependent on any type of life support equipment, you have an oxygen machine, or you have anything that helps with life support, make sure you understand how there's going to be a backup, or you have a plan to evacuate to another location. We have a program within National Grid that registers life support equipment customers. While they don't get preferential treatment to restoration, what they do is get an elevated level of information and outreach during an event. So there's a process to follow. You want to register as a life support equipment customer or a special needs customer, or even if you're a business that is considered critical infrastructure, you can register with National Grid as a critical facility, or have with life support equipment, and then you get additional information and outreach during a storm. So those are things to take stock in. Look at what you need to protect, how you need to protect it, build in contingencies, and then reach out to your utilities and your municipalities to look and see what programs are out there. A lot of the counties have a similar type of program when it comes to life support equipment customers, and so forth, that will help you prepare for an event and be very plugged into the information that's available. National Grid has a variety of different ways for you to stay in touch with us. There's a program called Stay Connected. You get sign up for a text messaging program. Like, I get text messages when there's a weather alert that could affect our system that tells you that there's going to be icing threat, or we're going to have a flood warning in this area. There's our app that will tell you how many outages are out and where and what the estimated time of restoration is. Our website is full of information about electrical safety and things you can prepare for and have in preparation for a storm. Understanding your electrical service. There's parts of your electrical service that you own and you're responsible for, and that we own and that we provide. So if something in your electrical system breaks during a storm, we can't connect power to that unless it's repaired. So just a general understanding of how the system works, what you're responsible for, what we're responsible for, and all the programs that you have access to through the company and through the municipalities that will help you be prepared for a storm are all out there for access via websites or anything like that. Our website that can help you look at that information. We have brochures that you can get. There's a lot of things out there to prepare. And even during a storm and a restoration, where it's a multi-day event, we provide certain things to the community that coordinate with the municipalities and the Red Cross, and the shelters, warming centers, cooling centers, and all kinds of things that can help you get through the event.
Thanks. I asked folks if you had a question, fill out in your 3x5 card, send it to the aisle, and I'd ask them. They brought me down a few. I've looked at them, and they're just incredible. They're excellent questions, so I want to get to them. Although the first one was my last prepared question, so whoever this is, great minds think alike. Kevin, should we be losing sleep at night over this?
I mean, absolutely. Because when I say that, I say absolutely because everything that my position in Washington, D.C., what I see, what I hear, see that's going on across the country, not only natural disasters, things that the country has been dealt with the last couple of months, but active shooters. The past year, we had the highest rate ever of ambush on police officers. Since 2012, 2017, we saw the increase every single year. And, why is that? What's going on in this country that's causing police officers responding to a domestic dispute and ends up with 2 police officers shot and killed. Of course, the past couple of months we had a couple of counterterrorism attacks in New York City. Number of cyber attacks that you read in the paper that affect all different types of commerce across this country. The gang issues that we deal with on a regular basis. And then probably our number one commodity is our children. I always say the FBI and the local law enforcement partners can arrest somebody every single day that are pedophiles, child pornographers, or people that target our children in this country. So there's a number of issues that we deal with. And yes, that I would say that it bothers me that you say you can't sleep at night, and it's what is going on now in this country that we didn't see 20 years ago.
I agree. I lose sleep every night over this. Anybody that thinks they can answer this question for us, what would be a good plan for churches as far as preparing for a disaster or an emergency? Anybody have any suggestions?
I think it would be the same thing that Glenn talked about earlier. You should need to assess the risks that are out there in terms of looking at what are the risks for your facility, looking at your operations and understanding the operations and being able to plan for that and how you will bring those operations back up. If that church is gone, what do you do for infrastructure? Where do you go? What's an alternate location? What do you do with your employees or people who are going to help you? How do you communicate with them? How do you get the information to them? First of all, are they safe? But then getting them back to work and having them help you rebuild. How do you get to your congregation and talk to them? And how do you communicate with your congregation? Also, if you have vendors? Do you have that vendor list? Do you have their names, their numbers? Do you have what you had in supplies or stock? Do you know what you're going to need? Do you have alternate locations that you can get that from? There's other contacts you probably have in having all of that information. Your finances. How are you going to finance this? Again, money speaks, money talks. You've got to have money available. Have you made any plans that if you don't have the money, how to rebuild? Where are you going to get that from? Do you have your financial statements available, so if you do have to go in for a loan or talk to somebody that you have that? And if you don't, how do you rebuild those? We had a small business once who was running a computer operation out of his basement, and it flooded. And the last thing he ran out and took was a hard drive. That's all he had time. Grabbed that on the run, and thankfully he did that because that's the only way he had the time to rebuild his small business. It had enough information on it that he had at least his technology in hand. So what do you do with your technology as well? But there are locations, and I'm sure there's other places that you can go do some additional research. I know that the SBA sometimes can help in certain instances, churches and organizations. So I would tell people to go ahead and to research that and find out where else you can get additional information. Google is one of our best partners, as well as Alexa these days, asking them some of these questions as well.
I feel compelled to say something because my mother and father probably love this because I'm a PK. Everybody know what a PK is? Preacher's kid. So, I went, and I also said, because for a number of years, very early, 20 years ago, I served as chairman of the trustee board at First Corinthian Baptist Church. And so, in Pensacola, Florida, and one of the things we had to do from a church standpoint is we had to look at it as a business. So, all the techniques and things that we've talked about tonight, looking at insurance, looking at payroll, looking at your system, it is no different from being a church or a school. And I think the issue now with in churches, just having conversations with people I know, I think churches now have to think about active shooter situations, and for their core people thinking about evacuation plans and nearest exit. 30 years ago, it was unheard of for people to go into a church and shoot. That's no longer the reality today. And so, and if you think about churches, you certainly have your mega churches, but in Buffalo it's no different. Most churches are small. And so, practicing and making sure that your members know how to get to the nearest exit, making sure that there's access available to them and having that conversation, I think is what pastors and trustees of land should do.
Great points. Kevin, you had something to add?
Just that Andrew said everything right. I remember when my kids were younger, 15 years ago, and we'd be going to church and I'd be putting my gun on. I'd be like, one of the law enforcement officers here in this room, and they'd be like, "Why are you bringing your gun to church for?" And at the time, it was unheard of. Where yeah, I felt bad I was doing that. Like, there's no need to do that. And now it's, I always have and always will. I think the other law enforcement people in this room agree that they do that. And so it's hard. The church is an open environment, and it's even sad to say now. I want to go, non-church times, and now churches are locked. Whereas always, any time of the day, you can go into church and pray and do what you want. And so a couple of months ago, if you remember, there was the church shooting in Texas. And in my division at headquarters at the time, the violent crime program, the church had a video and audio system inside the church that, watched that and watched out. So that's an active shooter event. He went in and watched how he executed every person in that church. So it's hard, but it's again a plan to be prepared if that does happen. Kind of now is either to hide or run or attack that shooter, not just to sit there and be a sitting duck. I always told my kids, you know, after the Aurora, if you're at a movie theater, see them just like this. And if that happens, you're gonna have to attack that person. You can't just sit there because you're gonna get killed. So, I think the other law enforcement guys will agree with me on that. And it's, that's all the churches definitely are.
That was a great question, whoever sent that down. I actually get asked that every now and then in interviews or in classes. And I would add one thing, and probably Kevin first for you, but would you suggest that churches go so far as to have an armed security force and really can extend that question to places like schools? It's a tough question.
Schools, yes. I mean, the churches, I mean, coming into church every day and seeing an armed person, I just think that's, I mean, for safety reasons, I mean, there's probably a lot of discussion on this, but I just don't know if it's the right thing.
Okay. Anybody else? I guess I'll ask a couple more. This is an excellent question, and again, whoever wants to answer. It seems that local fire and police, quote, the boots on the ground, unquote, are extremely essential to a disaster response. In reality, how often does your organization train, communicate, and plan with those local and fire police entities? Maybe, yeah, Glenn?
I can tell you that we work with local first responders, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's also required now as part of our planning process. So those entities that I mentioned earlier, the emergency services organizations, the county emergency managers, fire coordinators, sheriffs, state police, office of emergency management, local fire departments, local police, we meet with them at least once a year. And we have a protocol that we go over that has to do with everything that we do when we respond, so they know how we work. One of the most important things that we learned from working together in the early years of implementing our emergency response organization. We were the second utility in New York State to implement the incident command system within our emergency response organization. We did that with tremendous cooperation and help from Erie County and the New York State Office of Emergency Management that helped us with all the implementation and training. And the one thing that we learned over the course of that several-month process of working together is that we learned a lot about how the first responder community works, and they learned a lot about how we work. And they learned some things about us that they never knew before, or they just assumed it worked a different way. So by working together and meeting together often and talking about how our procedures work, you have a better understanding for how things work when you actually do get involved in an emergency situation. Everything from a motor vehicle accident that hits one pole, that happens every day. And we have our resources responding to it. Sometimes there's people trapped because there's wires on the car. Sometimes it's a fatality where we're actually the first ones on the scene sometimes. So working with law enforcement, police, fire, first responders, we do that all the time. And in fact, just a week ago, did a presentation in one of the volunteer fire organizations to go through electrical safety and our emergency response for what we do with emergency planning, to help the fire departments know, because they're an integral part of the response. Who's sitting on a down wire before we get there? The police and the fire departments. We relieve them so they can go to the next thing. So there's constant coordination with them, and really that's part of that communication and coordination I was talking about earlier in terms of those top two things. We do that right in the blue sky and set all that expectations up front. Responding to an emergency is just that much easier and that much more effective when we actually get into it.
Andy?
Obviously, at Ecmc, we have a really good relationship with both fire and police. Because of jail, we go through a number of protocols with the police. So I think anytime we have collaboration with non-fire police or any other type of police, it does make the disaster easier.
I'm getting a signal from the back of the room, 111. But I really need to address two of these questions. They're just excellent. This one asks, what is the employer's responsibility for any type of disaster that may keep the employees on the premises for any length of time? Does the disaster plan include how to provide food, comfort, etc.? And I think, Andy, you addressed that a little bit.
Yeah, there's not a specific law. One of the things that addresses it, what we tried to do was we asked a number of our employees to stay. We obviously pay them for their time to do that, and then we also tried to make sure we work in conjunction with our union partners. A large part of our hospital is unionized, and so and we look at them as partners. So working with them, where they can also communicate with their membership, I think is key. I want to go back to, I think the things that we learned was we had to do a lot of communication with the employees. We learned, we made a mistake early that Glenn referenced was we thought one system would be up in 3 days and it took 6 days. And that hurt, and what we learned from that was we're never going to do that again. And if we think it's going to take 2 days, we're going to tell everybody it's going to take 4 days. And we would overpromise and make sure we met the guidelines and met that time frame. So big. And then I go back to it again, making sure that our employees are taken care of the payroll situation and making sure that we fed them. And then we constantly think. I think having to make sure we go through a crisis, don't forget the human element of the interaction with your employees. It's just that crucial.
If you recall, there was an oil spill a few years ago. We refer to it as the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. British Petroleum operated a oil platform in the Gulf and had a leak. And there was concern, or it was noticed that during this disaster, there seemed to be a lack of communication by BP and its partners to the public. And this is an excellent question, which asks, in essence, is there a standard, or should there be a standard for businesses to communicate to the public and to the media in the event of experiencing a disaster?
I take a quick shot at that. Our emergency plan and our emergency plans are filed and approved by New York State. And in our emergency plans, there's a protocol for communication based on the type of an event. So the defining threshold for the communication protocol is an event that's going to take us less than 48 hours to restore power, or an event that's going to take us longer than 48 hours to restore power. And within those two parameters, there's communication guidelines that start with reporting that goes out to all of our state agencies and our liaisons that are out in the Emergency Operations Center in the county that goes out every 4 hours. In addition to that, we have a reporting requirement that dictates when we will do a press release, when we will do a communication to the public. And all of our protocols are all defined and regulated by our plans. So we definitely have a very comprehensive and robust communication protocol that's built into our business.
Part of the communication plans for us, we have a process. When we went through cyber, but we had to work hand in hand with the FBI, and the FBI asked us for a certain amount of time before we discuss specifics with the public, and so we, obviously working with them, which was a little different than our normal policy process. Go through a natural disaster, but I think organizations, depending on the size and complexity and fiduciary duty, do have an obligation to be able to notify the public, work with the media outlets to be able to present the information as accurately as possible. And one of the things that I think is crucial as you go through it is having good relationships with the media never hurts, and having and being collaborative and being transparent in the information, and then being able to say to them, at this time we can't talk about this, but at some point we will, and this is what we can give you right now. But doing that on a very consistent basis, I think is more helpful than not. And the more you can build that relationship, I think from a public relations standpoint, it's good because it allows you to control the message, as opposed to if you don't communicate with them or you don't communicate with internally, people will fill that space with their own thoughts. And once they do that, then that's when rumors come about, that's when inaccurate information comes about, and you want to be able to control your message.
I got to wrap up. Colleen, any final thoughts?
The only thing I'll say in this day and age is be very vigilant wherever you go, whatever you do. This thing is out there. See something, say something. If something is amiss, please make sure you take a second look at it and say something. We train our employees every day to do that, and they are very vigilant, and I'm very thankful of that. And the other thing that is out there with the attacks today, too, just to wrap up on that, is there is on YouTube, there's a very good video, Run, Hide, Fight. Having it mentioned, you may have to fight it sometime. When do you run? Is there an opportunity? Get out of there. Tell people that are in your way, they all should be leaving. If you have to hide, what happens? Turn off your phone, turn off the lights, make sure it doesn't look like anybody's there, but hide. You've got to fight. Make sure that you take that person out. Because if you don't take that person out, you can't do it, they're going to take you out. But that video is very good, and it's very good for yourself and for others to take a look at, especially in your workplace.
Kevin, FBI, final word?
I agree with what everybody said here, but the main thing is report to law enforcement, if the FBI or local state law enforcement. Something you might think is nothing can mean something, and so the more you communicate with us, the more that you tell us, the more that we could help you and get to something before it becomes a major problem. Something that's that person that's over there looks suspicious, or you were all of a sudden you're on your computer and you got some type of email that didn't look right. Report it to law enforcement before it becomes a big major problem.
Thank you. And final comments by Dr. Maker.
Well, I just want to thank the panel. This is amazing. It's like I have 5 things for the VP's meeting on Monday. John, help you remember. I thought we were ready. But we have some things to do. Steve, thank you very much for moderating tonight's conversation. Again, thank you all for coming out tonight. Be safe on your way home. I guess that's another thing you want to make sure about. But thank you again for supporting Medaille College and enjoying tonight's presentation.